guys. Welcome to my podcast, Hot Mess Heat, where we do real talk about real things, from the silly to the serious. Just a quick note that I happen to have some extra time on my hands right now, and I'm having fun talking to myself, so I've been putting a lot of content out this week. I'm probably going to be dialing that back and releasing only one episode each week once I go back to work. I think I've decided that I'm actually going to keep doing these for now, so I went ahead and bought the software to get rid of that irritating watermark. So yay for me. Today's podcast is going to be more on the silly side, unless you're super serious about chickens and eggs. So I definitely don't live on a farm, but we currently have 11 emotional support chickens. Their names are Rue, Blanche, Estelle, Sophia, Betty White, Rose, Dorothy, Bee, Larry Curly, and Mo. In spite of those last three male names, they're all hens. No roosters allowed. Roosters are irritating and crow early in the morning. And in spite of the fact that I am an insomniac, I'd really like to try and sleep in. And I think the rest of the people in my house probably want to sleep as well. So no roosters. Rue, Blanche, Larry, Curly, and Mo are the only ones that I can actually tell apart. Everybody else looks so similar that it's super tough to figure out who is who. I used to be able to tell Betty White from the rest of them because when they were younger, she was mostly white. But as she got older, she grew up to look like just all of the rest of them. So these chickens are pretty entertaining. If you've never seen a chicken run, you'll crack up the first time you get to witness it. We let them roam around our yard for a few hours most evenings. They're definitely flock birds. And when one of them gets separated from their friends, the panicked faux flight run to get back to their buddies is hilarious to witness. I chuckle almost every time. I'm convinced that chickens are what the Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur devolved into. If you've never seen a molting chicken, they're kind of terrifying looking. So how did we end up with yard birds when we definitely don't live on a farm, in spite of the zoo characterization from the other day? I can tell you that at least in our house, the chickens definitely came before the eggs by 6 months. So we ended up with chickens right as the initial pandemic COVID lockdowns were starting. So those first 2 weeks to slow the spread, and we were all at home, my husband got bored and had been talking about getting chickens for a while. And it was spring, it was March. So the Tractor Supply place had baby chickens. In spite of the fact that we did not have anywhere to keep the chickens, my husband went to Tractor Supply and picked up some chickens, brought them home, put them in our giant dog crate. And they were tiny chickens, so we couldn't leave them outside. It was too cold. So we brought them in. They lived in my basement for a while. I want to say 2 months. I'm not actually sure that's true. So while they were living in my basement, my husband was out building the Taj Mahal of chicken coops. So I call it the Chicken Mahal. Pretty big little space. It's a decent sized space for not a ton of chickens. We didn't actually start out with 11 chickens, though. My husband has a friend who he routinely gets into shenanigans with. Everybody needs a friend like this. But when one of them has an idea, they go to the other one, and it ends up costing them both money, which is fantastic, I guess. So this friend of my husband's lost his chickens to what we assume were foxes. And when he went to replace the chickens, the place he purchased these pullets from, pullets, if you're not aware, are female chickens that have just started laying eggs. So they're young egg layers. But anyway, apparently they were trying to get rid of them because there was a great deal on these chickens, and he ended up with more chickens than he had space for. So I mentioned the Chicken Mahal that we have here that my husband built. We have more than enough space for extra chickens. So, of course, my husband took a couple, and what he told me later was a humanitarian mission to save these chickens. God bless my sainted husband. Fun fact, I wasn't actually home when this chicken rescue occurred, and no one told me we had humanitarily rescued 3 chickens. I didn't actually figure it out until the next day when I let them out, and I was counting them as they were coming out of the chicken yard, and there were 3 more than I thought we should have. So these 3 got named Larry, Curly, and Mo. So we got these chickens when they were tiny, like super, super cute tiny chickens. And most chickens don't actually start laying eggs until they're about 6 months old. The hubby got Isa Browns, which apparently are early layers. I did a lot of research after we got these chickens, and the internet said that they might lay some eggs as early as 16 weeks. So around 4 months, I started to check the coop regularly for eggs. My mother-in-law has totally got jokes. She decided that she should prank me by dyeing one of my store-bought white eggs in coffee and putting it in the coop for me to find. So I went out one day and I was super excited because there was an egg, like we had an egg. And then I picked it up and I looked at it and I kind of, it didn't look like any brown egg I had ever seen. Yeah, I was convinced for probably a minute or 2, but then, the brown started wiping off and I figured out what had happened, and I thought my husband had done it, and he just laughed at me and wouldn't tell me who did it, so I figured out it was my mother-in-law. So I went and got a bright pink Easter egg and stuck it in the coop for her to find. I don't remember if she ever actually found it, but it made me laugh. Anyway, so we have 11 hens, and they're all great layers. So we get a lot of eggs a week. So we have lots of eggs. Like even in the winter, we have a ton of eggs. Right now, they're not laying as much. And today I went out and got 8 eggs out of the coop. So on any given day, we get anywhere from 6 to 11 eggs, which is super crazy. They freaking eggs everywhere. So sometimes we have overflow eggs, so we give them to our neighbors, we give them to local family members, we beg strangers and random passersby to please take these damned eggs. Sometimes I take them to the barn and I give them to my fellow volunteers. I make pound cakes, we have eggs for breakfast, I make quiches. Literally eggs everywhere. It's ridiculous. I am not sure what I was expecting actually with 11 chickens. Like I didn't think far enough ahead to figure out what the heck I was gonna do with all these eggs. I don't know. But just when I was at my wit's end, starting to get super, super frustrated with all of these eggs, my dad sent me a link to directions for this ancient method for storing eggs. I guess it's been around a while, maybe lost arts. It's called water glassing. Basically, you put eggs into a bucket or some kind of a container, and there's an actual ratio. If you Google it, you can find it. But you put pickling lime on them and then cover the whole thing with water, and they're supposed to keep for up to 2 years. I have some that we've stored that way for over a year at this point. Every once in a while, we'll pull one out and eat it just to make sure we don't die. Like if you ever leave my podcast, stop. It's because I ate one of those eggs and croaked afterwards. I'm kidding. Anyway, they're still good. The shells are a little more brittle though, and the yolks kind of flatten out a little bit, but they taste the same, and the texture is mostly the same too. So my parents were actually here for this past Thanksgiving, so I fed them eggs that were over a year old. No one died. So we have 11 chickens, and all of them are female. So no roosters, right? We already talked about that a little bit. Even though there are no roosters, every once in a while, one of our ladies decides she really wants babies. So she goes broody and hoards eggs and sits on them. For those of you who have never had the pleasure of having an emotional support chicken, a broody hen will literally sit on the nest without moving much, and they don't eat or drink enough. So it's a little concerning to have them go broody when you know there is no chance their eggs are ever going to hatch. There are lots of methods for stopping the broodiness, most of which boil down to like harassing them and tossing them off the nest routinely. So that's what we've done. One hen in particular is a frequent flyer on the broody train, Blanche. We actually just call her Mama most of the time because of how often she has gone broody. Mama is apparently a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. She is having babies whether we get her a rooster or not. The most recent time she tried to hatch herself some babies, fall was starting and the temperatures were really starting to cool off. So we were a little concerned she was going to freeze to death because she wasn't eating enough and she was losing weight and the temperatures were were dropping. So she was super determined. We must have it took weeks to break her. And we would harass her and throw her off the nest and shut up the coop so she couldn't get into there. And she actually started to identify me as a threat. Like she would puff up her feathers and vocalize literally every time she saw me. You ever been threatened by a scrawny chicken? They look pretty scary. Luckily, Mama never actually tried to eat me, which I'm grateful for because I think her T-Rex was coming out. When I was a kid, my sister and I used to take horse riding lessons, and there was a rooster at the barn that we went to that liked to chase us. He was pretty scary. Apparently, he actually spurred my mother at one point. She has a really great story about how she put a stop to his maulings, which I'll save for a time when I convince her to agree to co-host a podcast with me. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my goofy little chicken stories. I'll talk with you next time. Leave me a note if you have any thoughts or questions or chicken handling suggestions, because I'm totally a novice. I could use the help.